Hello viewers, welcome back to my channel Legal Decipher. In the previous video, we discussed about Chapter 2 of the Code of Criminal Procedure 1973. If you have not seen that video, you can go and check it. The link is in the description below. Today, we will discuss about the contents of Chapter 3 of the Code of Criminal Procedure. We will go through the chapter and try to understand how the functions are followed. If you are new here, please like and subscribe to the channel to get video notifications. So let's get started. So chapter 3 talks about the powers of the courts. It starts with section 26. Section 26 talks about courts by which offences are triable. It says that subject to the other provisions of this code, any offence under the Indian Penal Code may be tried by the High Court, the Court of Sessions, or any other court by which such offence is shown in the first schedule to be triable. So, we need to understand that an offence which is categorized in the Indian Penal Code shall be tried by the High Court, the Court of Sessions, or any other court that is mentioned in the first schedule, that such offence shall be tried by such court. It is mentioned in the first schedule to the CRPC. Provided that any offence under section 376, 376A, B, C, D, E, etc. We all know these are the sections of the punishment for various kinds of rape. They shall be tried as far as practicable by a court presided over by a woman. Okay, so the presiding officer shall, as far as it is possible, shall be a woman. Any offence under any other law shall, when any court is mentioned in this behalf by law, be tried by such court. So any other offence shall be tried by such court which is already mentioned in that behalf. And when no such court is mentioned, it shall be tried by the High Court or any other court by which such offence is shown in the first schedule to be triable. So either it will be the High Court or the court that is specifically mentioned in the first schedule that this offence shall be triable by that particular court. Now section 27 talks about jurisdiction in cases of juveniles. So any offence which is not punishable with death or imprisonment for life and which is committed by any person who appears or is brought before the court and he is under the age of 16 years, then he may be tried by the court of a chief judicial magistrate or by any other court which is specially empowered under the Children's Act of 1960 for providing them with treatment, training and rehabilitation for such youthful offenders. So these offenders are basically juveniles who are below the age of 16 years, and for them and for their trial, special juvenile courts are built across the country where these criminals are tried. Only in cases where the offences are not punishable with death or imprisonment for life. Now let's talk about section 28. This is a very important section. We need to understand the sentences which high courts and session judges may pass. So the High Court may pass any sentence authorized by law, which means the High Court has ample power to pass any sentence which is authorized by law. A sessions judge or additional sessions judge may pass any sentence authorized by law, but any sentence of death passed by any such judge shall be subject to confirmation by the High Court, which means the sessions judge and additional sessions judge has the same power as a High Court, but only in cases of death sentence, which means if the sessions judge or additional sessions judge is to pass a death sentence, then they need to confirm such sentence from the High Court. Only if the High Court consents that death sentence may be passed in such case, only then the sessions judge and additional sessions judge may pass such death sentence. Otherwise, they can pass any sentence authorized by law. An assistant sessions judge may pass any sentence authorized by law except a death sentence or a sentence for imprisonment for life or a sentence for imprisonment for a term exceeding 10 years. Section 29 also is very important. It talks about the sentences which magistrates may pass. The court of a chief judicial magistrate may pass any sentence authorized by law except a sentence of death or of imprisonment for life or of imprisonment for a term exceeding 7 years. The court of magistrate of the first class may pass any sentence which is not exceeding 3 years or not exceeding 10,000 rupees as fine or both. The court of magistrate of the second class may pass any sentence of imprisonment for a term not exceeding 1 year or a fine of 5,000 rupees or both. So these are the limits of the first class and second class magistrates. Now, the chief metropolitan magistrate shall have the same powers as the court of chief judicial magistrate, and the metropolitan magistrate shall have the same power as the court of magistrate of the first class. Section 30 talks about sentence of imprisonment in default of fine. So let's understand this. For example, if a person who is accused of a crime awarded a punishment of a term of imprisonment and alongside he has also been awarded a fine, and in such case the accused fails to pay the fine, then what will happen? So if the accused fails to pay the fine, he shall be awarded imprisonment in default of such failure, provided that such term shall not be in excess of the powers of the magistrate under section 29. We have read the powers under section 29. So it shall not exceed such power, and it shall not, where the imprisonment has been awarded as part of the substantive sentence, exceed 1/4 of the term of the imprisonment which the magistrate is competent to inflict as punishment. So say for example the ACJM is competent to inflict a punishment of 7 years in total. Now the substantive punishment of imprisonment is awarded as 6 years, and then a fine has also been imposed upon him. Now if it is found that the amount of fine that is imposed upon the accused person and the accused person fails to pay such fine, and the amount of punishment that is to be awarded against such default is 2 years, which will add up to that 6 years and make it 8 years, then the chief judicial magistrate cannot do so. Why? Because the maximum tenure that he can award as punishment is 7 years. He cannot punish that accused for 8 years of imprisonment. So this is what clause A of subsection 1 says. Now what does clause B say? Clause B says it shall not exceed 1/4 of the term of imprisonment which the magistrate is competent to inflict as punishment, if it is awarded as a part of the substantive sentence. So he will have to go with 1/4 of the term of imprisonment. And that is what is written in subsection 2. The imprisonment awarded under this section may be in addition to a substantive sentence of imprisonment for the maximum term awardable by the magistrate under section 29. So section 29 has defined the maximum term which a magistrate can award. So the imprisonment that is awarded against the default of payment of that fine shall be added to the main sentence, the main substantive sentence, and the total sentence shall be less than the maximum term awardable by such magistrate. Now let's move on to section 31. Section 31 says sentence in cases of conviction of several offences at one trial. So let's understand this. When a person is convicted at one trial of two or more offences, which means the accused is the same person, the trial is one, but there are two or more offences for which such accused is being tried for. Now the court may sentence him for such offences to the several punishments prescribed therefor. So if the person is found to be guilty of two offences or three offences and the punishment for them are different, then they will be awarded differently, but in the same trial. And such punishments when consisting of imprisonment. So when such punishments for those two or three offences are all imprisonments, such imprisonments will commence one after the expiration of the other, or the court may otherwise direct that they shall be running concurrently or simultaneously. So we understood that the punishments for different offences may run simultaneously if they are all imprisonments, or they can run one after another. Now subsection 2 says, in the case of consecutive sentences, it shall not be necessary for the court, by reason only of the aggregate punishment for the several offences being in excess of the punishment which it is competent to inflict on conviction of a single offence, to send the offender for trial before a higher court. So what does this mean? Now let's understand this. Say for example, the court of ACJM has awarded 5 years of imprisonment for one offence and 3 years of imprisonment for another in the same trial. Now, as the total exceeds his highest awardable amount of 7 years, so the question arises whether he can do so. The answer is yes. As long as the total does not exceed twice the amount he can award for one single sentence, or such total does not exceed 14 years, he can do so, and for that he does not need to send the offender for a trial before a higher court, for the reasons that it exceeds his maximum awardable sentence for a single offence or trial. So that is what is written in the proviso. And in subsection 3 it is written that for the purpose of appeal of a convicted person, the aggregate of the consecutive sentences passed against him under this section shall be deemed to be a single sentence. So if the convicted person wants to approach for an appeal before the higher forum, he can do so, and for that purpose the aggregate of the consecutive sentences that are passed against him shall be deemed to be one single sentence. Now section 32 talks about mode of conferring powers. It is not that important. It says High Court or the state government, as the case may be, by order empower persons specially by name or in virtue of their offices or classes of officials, generally be their official titles. So their official title will be those that were given to him or the name of their offices. Every such order shall take effect from the date on which it was communicated to the person so empowered. Section 33 is also not that important. It says powers of officers appointed. Whenever any person holding an office of service of the government who has been invested by the High Court or state government with any powers under this code throughout any local area, and he is appointed to an equal or higher office of the same nature within such local area. So unless the High Court or the state government otherwise directs, he shall have and exercise the same powers in the local area in which he is so appointed. So section 34 talks about withdrawal of powers. The High Court or the state government, as the case may be, may withdraw all or any of the powers conferred by it under this code on any person or by any officer subordinate to it. So if the High Court or the state government has given any powers to any person subordinate to it, then the same powers can be withdrawn by the High Court or state government. Any powers conferred by the Chief Judicial Magistrate or by the District Magistrate may be withdrawn by the respective magistrate by whom such powers were conferred. So whoever of the Chief Judicial Magistrate or District Magistrate has given any power to anyone subordinate to it, only he can revoke such power, withdraw such power. Section 35 talks about powers of judges and magistrates exercisable by their successors in office. So subject to the other provisions of this code, the powers and duties of a judge or magistrate may be exercised or performed by his successor in office. So let's understand this. For example, a judge or magistrate is transferred to a different station or has otherwise made the chair vacant. In that case, the successor in office means whoever succeeds that office shall have all such powers and duties as the previous judge or magistrate had. Where there is any doubt as to who is the successor in office of any additional or assistant sessions judge, the sessions judge shall determine. So it is the duty of the sessions judge to determine who is the next successor in office when there is any doubt regarding the additional or assistant sessions judge chair. When the same kind of doubt arises for any magistrate, the Chief Judicial Magistrate or the District Magistrate, as the case may be, shall remove such doubt as to who shall be the successor in office of any magistrate. So that's all in this video. If you like my videos, then don't forget to smash the like button and subscribe to my channel. Thank you so much for watching this video.